And I'm live. Hey, welcome to the Blathering Boomer. This is a rare Tuesday night edition of the Tuesday Night Podcast. Um, I did a lot of community theater back in the 90s, and to this day, I have a dream, and it's a recurring dream. And I think most people who've ever done theater can relate to this dream. It's opening night. I haven't been to rehearsals. I don't know my part. And I'm desperately scrambling backstage. Who has a script? Thinking I can memorize my entire part and the blocking before the curtain comes down. Total anxiety. And I have in real life, I kind of feel that way when I'm about to go on and doing one of these podcasts. So tonight I'm going to use notes. It's not a script. Um, but at least I have my thoughts, such as they are, organized, and I'm going to present them as we go. So far, nobody's watching, so there's no pressure here. There's this one guy, Sticks Hex and Hammer 666. One of the guys I still watch. He has an amazing talent. He'll get up there and go, blah, blah, blah. It's not blather. It's rather intelligent stuff, but he clearly isn't scripted, and he always is kind of in between 9 and 11 minutes. Always, I forgot how he opens, but he always closes with, "That's about all. Peace out." I enjoy. And he podcasts from the Netherlands, so first thing in the morning he's available on the West Coast. Anyway, so yeah, I'm using notes tonight. A couple of weeks ago, I was rather vocally critical of Aaron Mate's so-called interview with Senator Chris Coons, and last week somebody called me out on that, thinking that we have to be united and we can't be arguing about petty things. And anyway, he basically said when people who are on the same side argue about sub issues, it's that there's a problem. So when I first started this podcast and I farted around before I ever went live, I had a couple of guests on, and we did what was called the lightning round. And I had a list of, because my feeling is that if you name enough topics, no two people are going to agree on all of them. It's mathematics. So at the time I had 59 topics. Somebody pick a random number and discuss that topic. I'm going to do something different tonight. I've trimmed that list of 59 down to 39 topics, and the chance of, if you flip a coin 39 times, assuming it's a fair coin, the chance of the coin coming up either heads or tails 39 times in a row is 2 to the power of 39, which is 549,755,813,888. No, I did not do that in my head. Now, in actuality, there are some people who agree on certain things. Oh, who do we got? Hey, Kate, thanks for tuning in, and whoever else is watching. I got 2 watchers. Oh, yikes, the pressure. So anyway, I keep losing my train of thought. The point being, like, a couple of the things on the list are like Assange and Snowden. Well, I dare say that people who think Assange should be free most likely also think Snowden should be allowed to come back to the United States and be free as well. So in reality, that 549 billion, one out of 549 billion, it's a much lower number, but it's still very significantly high. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to go over 39 issues, and I'm going to do my best not to take sides on these, but just to present as best I can both sides of the issue. So I'll put it up there with us, and hopefully you're seeing it just like I am. Let's see. Yeah, it's up there. And it hasn't disappeared from my computer. Okay, so yeah, I have it on top. That's how I know. I did look up to the 39th power. So let's get into these. Number one, DEI versus merit. Do you believe that the best and brightest of us should get the positions and admittance to universities, et cetera? Or do you think it should be based on equity and keeping it, keeping the numbers racially equitable? Trans athletes in women's sports. Do you think that it's okay for somebody who has decided he's a woman and has perhaps done some transitioning, maybe fully transitioning, but nevertheless born a male, is now a woman and should be allowed to compete in women's sports? Or do you think people with gender assigned at birth of male should not be allowed to compete in women's sports? Pretty simple. 2020 election, a very, very divisive topic. Do you think the 2020 election was actually fairly adjudicated? George Floyd riots. Now, these next two actually, evidence has come up, new evidence, but this list was written a long time ago. So the George Floyd riots, were they riots? Were they mostly peaceful protests? Was it right for people to be doing what they did? In some cases, burning police stations, et cetera, was that a righteous cause, or was this not exactly the best way to express whatever you were trying to express regarding the death of George Floyd? Kind of the same thing with January 6th. More evidence has come out regarding January 6th. I'm not going to take a side, but really the question comes down to, was this an insurrection, or was this some people righteously angry, venting their anger? Ukraine. Do you think that we need to be involved with Ukraine defending itself against Russia's invasion? Seth Rich, was he the person who leaked the DNC, the information on the DNC that regarding the rigging of the primaries, which nobody seems to disagree that the primaries in 2016 were rigged when it was Bernie versus Hillary. The question is, was it the Russians or was it Seth Rich that blew the whistle on this whole thing? Which segues into Trump. To some, he's a villain. To some, he's a victim. To some, he's a hero. Where are you regarding Trump? Gender fluidity. Let me see. Do I have comments? V.S. Adams. That's Vicky. Hey, thanks for joining. Okay, let me get back to the list. Just wanted to check and see who was here. Gender fluidity in children. If a child expresses that he or she is actually a person of the opposite sex, born and trapped in a body that isn't correct, is it okay to start puberty blockers, hormones, et cetera? That's a very, very hot button topic. So, and again, some of these topics are actual purity tests where if somebody feels differently than the other person, it's like, okay, we can't even have a conversation. And some of these are, a little more trivial. The gender fluidity one is one that people are pretty polarized on. Epstein's suicide. Well, some people think Epstein actually committed suicide, and some people think he was silenced. Some people even think he's still alive. Bat or lab? Do you believe Fauci? Do you think that COVID started because of a bat in a wet market, or do you think there was a lab leak from the Wuhan lab? The border. Is the border open? Should the border be open? Should we be solving the crisis at the border, or should we be focusing on the cause of the people fleeing their countries to come here, especially as it relates to possible U.S. intervention in those countries? That's a topic I've argued about several times. Again, I'm happy to discuss any of these if that comes up. Number 13, third party or lesser of two evils. Well, we sure as hell faced that in 2016 and is gearing up to be facing that in 2024 with a new twist. And that twist is Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because this time around, it's very possible. It's within the realm of possible possibilities that this particular third party can actually win. Student loan forgiveness. Should we be blanket forgiving student loans? Should we be doing it partially? Should we be doing not at all? I was actually called a name because of my position on that, but I'm not going to say what my position was. The vaccine and the mandates. Are you one of those people who showed their vaccine status on Facebook in a frame? Or are you one of those people who absolutely will not get jabbed and carry ivermectin around in your suitcase just in case? The mandates are another story. Some people who are for the vaccine have actually gotten the vaccine are against the mandates, which segues into Trudeau. Trudeau is a fucking scumbag asshole, and that's both sides of the story there. Sorry, but I have no opinion on that, of course. AOC. Some people think she's absolutely a progressive heroine, and some people think she's a total douchebag. And very few people are neutral on that one. Abortion. I lost a 50-year friendship because as a white male, well, again, white has nothing to do with it. As a male, I said the word abortion during a political discussion, and somebody stormed away from the dinner table. And I later found out that that person does not appreciate men talking about abortion, which she feels very strongly is strictly between a woman and her doctor. That being said, some people are completely pro-life, some for religious reasons, some people are completely unrestricted. I've heard that, I can't believe this is really a thing, but I've heard that there's up to the moment of birth abortions, post-birth abortions. I don't have any proof of that. I actually am hoping it's just untrue. But is there a line? Is there a line beyond which it's not okay to get an abortion? Gas stoves. Well, I think a lot of us saw the video of Kamala Harris and the gas stove in her kitchen, but some people think we shouldn't have gas stoves. Are you one of those? Global warming. That's been a church. That's like, as some of us, I guess myself included, after 2016, started questioning a lot of things that we were just being presented to us. And global warming was one of those untouchable things. Of course, we want to save the planet. Of course, the ice caps are melting, et cetera, et cetera. Greta Thunberg, et cetera, and all this. And I said, et cetera, way too many times. Is it a hoax? Is it the destiny of this planet? Which side are you on that one? Minimum wage. Do you think there should be a federal minimum wage? Do you think there should be no minimum wage? Do you think it should be state by state, county by county? But the next one is the one that is the most controversial at all. And I am absolutely not going to say what my opinion on this is, but this was a big, big topic not that many years ago. Tastes great or less filling? You tell me. And if you're a Gen Zer, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. It's an old beer commercial. I think it was Miller Lite. Tucker Carlson, is he some kind of right-wing nut job, or is he like one of the very few real truth tellers we have in the media? Tulsi Gabbard, is she a progressive heroine? Is she a patriot? Is she a Russian asset, as Hillary would have you believe? A lot of people have turned on Tulsi Gabbard lately. I'll admit that I am not among them. And in fact, I'm going to share some of the things she said in this podcast. Bernie Sanders, progressive hero. We all loved Bernie at one time, and a lot of us kind of think that he kind of turned into a sheepdog and basically was controlled opposition. Some say he sold out. Some say he was blackmailed. Where are you on Bernie Sanders? Maxine Waters, is she some kind of outspoken anti-establishment, or no, not anti-establishment, but the stuff she says about Trump when she got up there, and I showed her my podcast last week when she said, get out there and take to the streets. And if you see anybody from Trump's cabinet out there in real life, get in their faces. Is she cool? Dr. Seuss and the Little Rascals, kind of the same category. A lot of people think that we should not be exposed to some of Dr. Seuss's writing and some episodes of Little Rascals because they're considered racist. Some people think that that is just the culture of the times. Where are you on that? Legalization of drugs. Do you think the drug problem would go away if they were just legalized? Should drugs be a legal issue or a health issue? Prostitution's kind of a cousin of that. Do you think a lot of the ugliness that goes with prostitution would go away if prostitution were legalized and regulated, et cetera, et cetera? Globalism versus nationalism. Do you believe in one big world government, or nationalism where the world is filled with different nationalities, different ideologies, borders, etc.? I already kind of mentioned Assange and Snowden, and I've said in a previous podcast, whether or not you feel Assange should be freed is pretty much my purity test. I am very much for freedom of the press. I think Assange is in prison, and I know I'm parroting somebody who said this, but it's really true. Assange is locked up not for lying. He's locked up because he told the truth. And Snowden's kind of in that category as well, but he's not locked up. He's just hiding out in Russia. Hopefully he's making a good life for himself and he finds some joy. Trump's first impeachment, where that's an interesting one. He made that phone call to Ukraine, looking into the firing of the prosecutor that was investigating Burisma, where Hunter Biden was on the board of directors, et cetera, et cetera. And he actually got impeached for making that phone call. The question is, did Trump really do something wrong, or was that just a political maneuver to try to get an impeachment on his record, or any other permutation you can think of? Hunter's laptop. You're probably aware that in the run-up to the 2020 election, the information on Hunter's laptop was very heavily suppressed by censors in the government, and they leaned on social media to not cover it, and they didn't cover it in mainstream media. So some of us knew about him, but a lot of us didn't, and a lot of people say that information very well could have changed the result of the 2020 election. So do you think Hunter's laptop is real? Do you think it matters? And do you think censoring it up before 2020 was a good strategic move on the part of the government, or Orwellian censorship, or anything in between? Hillary's emails. Hillary was not prosecuted or indicted, even though she destroyed a whole bunch of evidence, 33,000 emails to be exact, or to be close to exact, that were under subpoena. Do Hillary's emails matter in terms of the 2016 election? Term limits. Do you think that our representative, obviously the presidency has a limit of 2 terms, but do you think that our congresspeople and other government officials should have term limits? Reparations. Now, this one's pretty divisive. Do you think that descendants of slaves should be given reparations? How far does it extend? And who pays for it? It's, the effect of slavery, to a certain degree, some would certainly argue it's the effects of it are still being felt now. And others feel it was in the distant past, and people today who had nothing to do with slavery, and people who are descended from people who had nothing to do with slavery, shouldn't have to pay the bill for the sins of the past. And then one of the most divisive issues, the Second Amendment. Every time there's another shooting, gun control becomes a hotbed issue. So where do you stand on the Second Amendment? I know people on both sides of that issue. Anyway, those are the 39 topics, and good luck trying to find somebody who agrees with you on all 39. Once again, if all these are a coin flip, the chance of finding somebody who agrees with you on all of them are 1 in 549 billion and change. So there we go. And okay, so those are all that list, and there were 20 more that I just didn't bother with tonight in the interest of time. But nothing Nothing is as divisive. Oh, let me get myself back on here. Nothing is as divisive as what's happening in the Middle East now. That has become the purity test, and most people are very, very heavily on one side or the other. Oh, okay, so I gotta look at my notes. And first I want to share, because I've been very critical of the role independent media has played in covering the Middle East situation. I feel pretty strongly that they are presenting a very, very biased view. And what I said in a tweet that I read last week, if you don't present both sides of the story, you're not practicing journalism. At best, you're being an advocate. At worst, you're being a propagandist. Well, I'm just a blatherer from Brooklyn. But there is a woman who was a 2020 presidential candidate, has served in the military for many, many years. I think 20 years, something like that. Signed up after 9/11, so however long ago that was, 22 years ago. And she basically stated this far more eloquently than I ever could. So let's hear from former Congresswoman, the one and only Tulsi Gabbard.
Is to turn the world against Israel. You listen to that Sky News reporter and the question that she asked. She's emblematic of this broader issue we're seeing with many so-called reporters who aren't just reporting facts, but instead essentially doing Hamas's work for them. Mm-hmm. Hamas's goal is to turn the world against Israel in order to reach their objective goal and the goal of other Islamist groups and countries, frankly, which is wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They're succeeding in doing that by using these reporters who have become their propagandists. Yeah. And those who are naturally compassionate by nature are hearing this and hearing things that are not representative of the truth and falling for it and turning against Israel and not actually seeing the truth of how Islamists and terrorist groups like Hamas, as you know, ISIS and Al-Qaeda and others, they have always used civilians as human shields. They have always hidden behind them for this exact reason, because they know that the news media, many of them, will throw this propaganda out there without telling the full story about their barbaric tactics and their willingness to sacrifice women and children, innocent civilians, to achieve their objective. And so people need to understand the whole truth on this whole war.
Okay, thank you, Tulsi. Yeah, she said that much more eloquently than I could. And yes, we have decent people listening to these podcasts. We, as decent people, we defend the marginalized. And again, as I said last week, we defend the victim, not the bully. The question is, who's marginalized here? 2,000 years of pogroms, being kicked out of their lands, and everything that's followed. Yes, my heart goes out to the innocent Palestinians who are victims in this. But I believe that, and you can blame Israel all you want, but if you don't also acknowledge Hamas's role in what's happening to the Palestinian people, the innocent people of Palestine, you're not telling the whole story. And I think Tulsi Gabbard did a really good job there of presenting the case. And let me give you an example of what goes on in the media. And I'll share this with you. This is going to be from Anya Parvampil. And this is, even though I can't probably pronounce her last name correctly, this is somebody I've been following for a long time, and I've usually agreed with her. But she's right on that boat of being a Hamas propagandist, in my opinion. So, again, all roads sometimes lead to Tulsi, and this one certainly does. Anya tweeted out, "Tulsi is grateful for the opportunity to humiliate herself as a Zionist shill. Okay, so let me share that screen, and I'll even show that tweet. And here it is. I'm getting better at this, huh? No more long delays. I actually organize these things. So yeah, as you could see, I hope you could see, Anya tweeted out, Tulsi is grateful for the opportunity to humiliate herself as a Zionist shill. So one might ask, well, how did this humiliation manifest itself? What did Tulsi say that makes her a Zionist shill? Well, let me share with you what she said in actual.
Aloha, friends. I hope that you and your loved ones are well and safe on this beautiful Thanksgiving Day. Every year as Thanksgiving comes around, it is a wonderful opportunity to just pause and reflect on all that we're grateful for. I'm grateful to God for his unconditional love, for the chance to learn and to grow and to do my best to be of service to God and to others. I'm grateful for the love of my wonderful and caring husband and for our many friends. During these difficult times, especially, I'm grateful to be alive, to have the opportunity and the privilege to serve our great nation and work for the enduring peace, security, and freedom of the American people. Aloha and happy Thanksgiving. Aloha, friends. I hope that you and your loved.
Whoops. Okay. Sorry, Tulsi. Okay. Wow, Tulsi, that sure was one hell of an inflammatory statement about Israel-Palestine. That's what a great example of what goes on, though, because the comments under Anna. Well, I guess I'm going to do this live, but so I'll go back to the screen. But some hateful comments. Here, let me get back into Twitter. And I'll share my own comment on this as well. Are we there? Yes, we are. So bear with me. I'm going to back up a little bit. And here's what I had to say about that. Anya has become scary, but scarier still are the comments below her post. It feels like the woke mind virus has mutated into some kind of anti-Semitic plague and is being purposely spread far and wide by pseudo-intellectual hacks. Thank you for continuing to call this out. And that was a tweet from Abhijit Kulkarni. Again, I apologize if you don't, if I said your last name wrong, but I thank you, Abhijit, for bringing that tweet to my attention. And once again, some of the comments under Anya, is why is this fraudulent woman on Fox News? I don't get how anybody thought she was anti-war. You're humiliating yourself as an unintelligent person with cruel tendencies. Oh, actually, I wonder. I apologize, Goldie. I think you were talking about Anya there, not Tulsi. So sorry about that. I know where your heart is, Goldie. More and more. Oh, again, that's directed at Anya. So her fake gray hair strand always bothered me. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. The Palestinian children is also sending you a Thanksgiving gift to you and your family. Okay, so you get the picture. The point is there a point? The point is, I don't want to say right or left. I still consider myself a leftist, but the so-called left, Indy journalists, are really out of control. Somebody could take a loving Thanksgiving message and accuse her of being a Zionist shill. And by the way, here's a question I always ask. What is Zionism? Because that's an important question. What is Zionism? That's a discussion I'd like to have. Is Zionism merely, and I guess that should be number 40 on the list, but again, this would be a very hot button issue. But to break it down a little bit, is Zionism merely the expression of a desire to have a Jewish state after everything the Jews have been through for 2,000 years and up to the 6 million killed in World War II? Although Zionism does have its genesis in the late 19th century, or is Zionism the act of inappropriately settling on what should be Palestinian territory, and and being aggressive towards innocent people. I know what I think Zionism is. I've in the past been very critical of the Netanyahu administration, and I had that joke again, where Jewish friends of mine would criticize me for being critical of Netanyahu for several years before this. I'd say, well, if you want to call me anti-Zionist, that's fine, but if you want to call me anti-Semitic, I want my foreskin back. And I'm gonna see what Kate has to say about this. Oh, I guess Vicky had a run, and Kate didn't have a moment to say goodbye. Okay, well, I'm sure that Vicky will watch the podcast later when she has time, and hopefully see it. Anyway, that's a big one. I'll ask: do you think Israel has a right to exist? Do you think it's okay for Israel to be settling on what arguably is Palestinian territory? Do you think Israel is Palestinian territory from the river to the sea? Do you think those demonstrations on college campuses, some of which have become violent, are righteous people with a cause, or just angry people listening to people like Anya, because again, as much as I'm critical of Indy media, I'm not gonna. They're powerful. They really are. I followed them religiously for 7 years, and I lionize them as truth tellers, and I'm not the only one. So when these truth tellers are taking a position, and they're taking a Hamas propagandist position, what do you expect people to do? And again, Tulsi said that far more eloquently in the first video than I did now or ever could. Okay, enough politics. We got to talk about why I'm pissed off. And this is why I'm pissed off. Because, oops, hang on a second. I got to go to my notes. Yes, because in 44 hours and 57 minutes, this cast that I am so done with is supposed to come off. That's not why I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off because the cast should be coming off in 43 hours and 57 minutes. But no, they had to do daylight fucking savings time and turn the clock back by an hour. So I'm wearing this cast for an hour more than I should. And I haven't felt this much outrage since I found myself in jail on February 29th, 1976. Because February 29th, I could tell you from experience, is the worst day to be in jail. They add 24 hours to everything. Why was I in jail on February 29th, you might ask? Well, I've alluded to this in a couple of the videos, but I want to clarify a couple of things, especially the hot tuna thing. Up until the hot tuna concert, and I mentioned drugs last week. I wasn't selling speed. I wasn't selling coke. I wasn't selling heroin. I was selling weed and psychedelics, LSD specifically. And what started out as me buying 100 hits at a time and selling them for a modest profit to people in the dorms who, it was a very widespread use. And I have to state this up front. LSD is not for everyone. Like so many powerful things, it's a tool in the right hands and a danger in the wrong hands. So it's not something to be taken lightly. But again, this is 1975. I'm in college, and when you're in college, the rules are a little bit different. So I was, buying 100 hits at a time, tossing around hits in the dorms. Nobody was creating too much of a stir. Then, and as I've said as I believe if I ever get my book written, the first words will be, like so many things in life, this all happened because of a hot tuna concert. So here's what happened with the hot tuna concert. 3 of us had tickets to go see Hot Tuna in Binghamton. And it was actually to be my first show. I was going because David Bromberg was opening. I love David Bromberg. But the other two guys, my friend Harry, my friend Joe, they were both seasoned Hot Tuna fans, and they suggested very, very strongly that we psychedelicize ourselves for the show. However, there weren't any hits of LSD available anywhere in Albany. It's what we call a dry spell. Well, as you know, I'm from Brooklyn, so I made a phone call to Brooklyn, and I asked my friend in Brooklyn, are there any hits down there or any blotters down there? And he said, yeah. And I said, great, I need 3 hits. And his answer was, oh, I could sell you some, but the minimum quantity I'll sell you is 1,000. So what was I to do? I bought the 1,000. And we went to the Hot Tuna concert, and David Bromberg was predictably great. And Hot Tuna was, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but they were amazing. Jorma was and is one of the best guitar players ever that maybe doesn't appear on the usual lists you'll see. And Jack Cassidy is a bass player extraordinaire with the best of them. So the Hot Tuna concert was wonderful. I got back to Albany, and now there was the matter of 997 hits of LSD in my possession that I needed to adjudicate. Well, much to my shock and at the time delight, the demand was tremendous, and I sold them all in probably about 10 days, and I made a really tidy profit. But I was, the dealing I was doing at the time was to cover gambling debts. And the result of the Hot Tuna concert was I went from being a retailer to a wholesaler. So while tossing some hits around in the dorms is one thing, selling it by the hundred to people who I have no idea what they're going to do with it was an entirely other thing. And one thing led to another. And through a series of what I was a victim of. I consider myself a victim for a long time, but now looking back, it was pretty good police work on their part. They went through the whole organization. I sold to John. John sold to Gary. Gary sold to Mark. Mark sold to Bobby. Bobby was a New York State trooper undercover. Bobby got Mark to get it. Bobby got to Mark through Mark. Then Bobby got to Gary through John. Gary brought Bobby to my house on November 3rd, 1975, where I sold Gary 100 hits in front of Bobby. And then Bobby came back 2 days later on November 5th, 1975, saying he couldn't find Gary and he really needed 100 hits. And I lightly scolded him and said, listen, you really should be going through Gary, but you got an emergency. I want to take care of you. So I sold him 100 hits. That was my A2 felony. And I think the reason that the more serious charge was on the November 5th sale, because the November 3rd sale didn't actually hit. Bobby's money nor my hits never touched each other's hands. Everything went through Gary that day. That was a weaker case. November 5th, they really had me. So November 5th, I was facing 8 1/3 to life. November 3rd, I was facing 1 to life. And there I was in Albany County Jail. And I'm gonna go overtime type because it occurs to me, I kind of rush through these things because I try to keep it to 10 minutes and it always ends up being 40. And now I'm trying to keep it to 40. But I have no reason to do that. There's no station break. There's no commercial. Nobody's waiting to come on after me. So hopefully these stories are entertaining at worst and informative at best, or however you want, whatever adjectives you want to use. So there I was in jail on February 29th. And Albany County Jail was a horrible place. So yeah, and again, I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'll kind of just tell the story. It was a horrible place, and there I was waiting to be transferred to state prison because the nightmare couldn't end until the nightmare began. And in Albany County Jail, it, excuse me, let me grab some water. The clock wasn't really going to start until I arrived in state prison. So I'll read from the story, and I might stop to comment or skip. I was very, anyway, here, I'll just read. What I believed would be a few days slowly stretched into 3 weeks, which might not sound like much, but it felt like 3 years at the time. When one's biggest hope every night is that one will be taken to state prison in the morning, one is clearly living far south of the Mendoza line. And I failed to share my screen. So let me share my screen on that. I just realized that. So you can read with me if that's what you'd like to do. And this should be it right here. And there it is. So back to it. Yeah, so when one's biggest hope every night is that one will be taken to state prison in the morning, one is clearly living far south of the Mendoza line. Mendoza line is a baseball term. Look it up. Well, it didn't take long for the waiting to develop a voice of its own. And it didn't take long for that voice to start whispering to my impatience, asking my impatience to please kick in, and caused me to pull a guard aside and ask him what the fuck was going on with my transfer. But then my survival instinct kicked in, a few decibels louder than my impatience, and talked me into just hanging in there. So by now it should make sense that when I was rudely awakened by one of the guards at 5:30 a.m. and told to pack my gear, I was positively euphoric, thinking this was truly going to be a truly indeedy glorious day. At the risk of being embarrassingly repetitive, I must emphasize once again that to me, this was the dawning of the next necessary step, this ordeal being over. 3 of us were going upstate that day. Gary Decker, who got way too drunk one night and was arrested for attempted robbery, although he claimed to not remember any details other than waking up behind bars. Jimmy Thomas, who got way too poor one decade and decided to guide Capital District tourists into handing him their wallets at gunpoint. And, of course, me. And we were traveling in a style befitting of the occasion. We were handcuffed to belts that were strapped around our waists, and we were put in leg irons. It was the first time I'd ever worn leg irons. Go figure. Leg irons are a bitch. And if you don't know how to walk in them, you can really hurt yourself. But indeed, I was euphoric, and I barely noticed it when the shackles would hit my Achilles tendon every time I took too big a step, as we were being led to the transport vehicle that was awaiting us. Okay, now, a new issue is about to arise. I am reading a story, and in the story I am reading, I am going to quote something that Jimmy Thomas, a black man, said. Now, there's a word that white guys are never, ever supposed to say. Now, I'm going to end the word with an AH and not with an ER. I'm not racist. I'm telling a story. And sorry, but the story is more effective if I have the right to accurately quote the people I'm quoting. So I'm just going to read this and let the chips fall where they may. And if people think I don't have the right to read this out loud or to write what I wrote, I want to know that. I'm willing to have that discussion. But I wrote this story some years ago, and I'm reading it. So, because I was really struggling with the leg irons, and Jimmy noticed it, and my stumbling seemed to bring out the professor in him. That day's lecture went something like this. Nigga, you're going to learn how to walk in them here motherfuckers. You're going to break both your goddamn legs before you ever get to the police car. And again, that's just how Jimmy talked. I like to think I earned my nice racism patch by being in a prison that was 70% black for a year and making friends. But anyway, whatever. People are going to have their own opinions, and people feel really strongly about that. Anyway, Decker told Jimmy to shut the fuck up. Then one of the guards told all of us to be quiet, using his club as a pantomime prop to emphasize his point. I found all this to be morbidly funny, but I knew that my laughter would not add anything good to the scene. So I kept on walking, trying not to stumble and trying to keep a straight face, and we finally got to the car. One sheriff drove, another rode shotgun. We sat in the back, Gary Decker on the left, Jimmy Thomas in the middle, me on the right. And this is a stupid line. Looking back on it, I guess we're sitting in alphabetical order. Whatever, Ungerleider. We were rolling northbound on I-87, the Adirondack Northway, at close to 100 miles per hour. It's the only time in my life I was ever in a car that went over 90 with no fear of being stopped for speeding. My lawyer had told me I was a cinch to be placed in an honor camp, given my education, lack of prior criminal record. I could hardly wait. Well, after an almost 3-hour northbound drive, we arrived in the small town of Dannemora, New York. I knew I was going to go through a reception center for classification before being transferred, hopefully, to the honor camp. What I didn't know was the fact that the reception center was a maximum security facility behind a 30-foot-high concrete wall complete with armed guards and towers overlooking the visible echoes of 100 years of despair and terror. I like that line, and I wrote it. But yeah, wow. And by the way, they did. If you saw the miniseries "Escape from Dannemora," where those two guys escaped from the maximum security prison, this was that prison. I've been in that yard, and having been in that prison, not that I like those two guys. Especially one of them was a horrible criminal, belonged in prison. The place seemed, I was very impressed by the fact that they escaped. I mean, there should have been no way out of there. Okay, so again, what I didn't know was the fact that the reception, I know I'm going to say it twice, but I like this paragraph. What I didn't know was the fact that the reception center was a maximum security facility behind a 30-foot-high concrete wall, complete with armed guards and towers overlooking the visible echoes of 100 years of despair and terror. And that was just on first glance. A few seconds later, 6 words came to my mouth. There was a sheriff in close proximity to me, so I uttered them in his direction. I could still remember all 6 of them. They were, "You have got to be kidding." I don't remember his reply. I was too busy watching Euphoria exit and reality enter. And that is that story. And by the way, I did the story last week called The Oasis Within. This one's called They've Got to Be Kidding. I am going to put both of these stories on Substack. And in fact, I will be reading a story every week, preferably on Tuesday nights, and putting the written version on Substack for anybody who wants to look further into it. And let me see what Kate has said. Oh, yeah. Why am I in a cast? This is a really stupid story. Okay, I'll tell the story, then it's probably I gotta go. This story is told a lot better when Stephanie is with me, because she was there when this happened, and we kind of tell the story in tandem from my point of view and her point of view. But since Stephanie's not here, I'll just tell it from mine. We were back in Brooklyn. We all, a bunch of us grew up together in Brooklyn. And when we were 12 years old, the guys had a basketball team called the Czars. I was not good enough to be on their team, and I resented that for 50 years. We were, again, we were age 12. Well, at age 62, one of our sons was getting married in New Jersey, and a bunch of us came from all over the country to be at the wedding. And it was a wonderful little reunion. And of course, when a bunch of Brooklyn assholes get together, what do they want to do? They want pizza. But the problem was we couldn't agree on whether to go to Lenny's or L&B Gardens. And some people even said J&V, which didn't exist when we were 12. So there was controversy as to where we were going to meet for pizza. So the compromise was we're going to meet at the park. And I'm going to get there, Kate. This is really about how I came to this. So we met up at the park. Long story short, one of the guys brought a basketball. So we're on the basketball court, the same one we played on when we were kids, just around the corner from where I grew up, Cropsey Park, for those of you who know Brooklyn. And so they're shooting the ball around. No, we're not playing a game. We're just shooting the ball around. But these guys, these 62-ish year olds, they're not even hitting the rim. They're barely hitting the backboard. They're taking shots that I was personally embarrassed. So what happens? The ball comes to me at the foul line. I grab it. The last words out of my mouth before the ambulance came were, "Let me show you assholes how it's done." And I sure did show them. I took 3 running steps, dribbled for the easiest uncontested layup in the history of Mr. Nesmith's invention of the game of basketball, shot the ball, landed on my feet, but I forgot about this little thing that Mr. Bernstein taught us in 12th grade physics, which is a concept of momentum. So I landed on my feet, which stopped, but the rest of my body didn't stop. And I fell flat on this hand, snapped it back. I'm not going to show you the x-rays. They're pretty gross, but I really broke my wrist really badly. Now, that was 6 years ago. I believe that was in 2017. Whenever Augie's son was married, it was the day before that. I think it was 2017. It might have been 2016. Pretty sure it was 17. Anyway, I end up in the ambulance, end up in Maimonides Hospital. They said it, and it was very badly displaced. They said it without any real painkiller. They gave me a shot of lidocaine, which did nothing. I was absolutely screaming, crying, begging them to stop. And when they finally did stop and we walked out into the hall to go to where they were going to cast it, people in the hallway who heard me screaming were staring at me like in horror. I just looked at them and I said, "Well, didn't hurt a bit." Kept on walking. I got a couple of chuckles out of that. So anyway, they casted it. I came back to California. They did surgery, and they put me in this way, way too tight cast for a very, very long time. I hated that cast. I called it the Castile. And I complained bitterly to the doctor that the cast was too tight. And he kept insisting that that the cast was just the way he wants it. Thank you, Kate, but it's arguable about whether I ever could play guitar, but thanks for the comment. Anyway, the cast was so tight that when it finally came off, the little finger on this hand was bent backwards. The knuckle was protruding outwards. I have photos of it that I'll share sometime. I don't have them handy right now. Every time I washed my hands, I felt the knuckle sticking out. Every time I applauded, I felt the knuckle. It was like hard to applaud. And the finger was bent back. If I was ever to, play catch with one of my grandkids and the ball would hit me in the finger, there was a significant chance that it would snap backwards. And that prospect was really, really scary. So I went to Cedars-Sinai Hospital. They didn't, nothing came of that, really. A few years went by, and then earlier this year, I finally couldn't stand it anymore. So I saw the orthopedic hand specialist in my medical group, and he said, "Oh, I could fix that." I'm like, "Great, fix it, because if you can't fix it, remove it." I was really prepared to have 9 fingers, because this finger was a disaster waiting to happen. It didn't really do anything, and it's on my strumming hand, not my fretting hand. So I didn't need it to play guitar as well as I play guitar, which is anyway, I'm not going to go there. So I had the surgery in February, and the doctor told me if I travel too soon after the surgery, the finger will swell up and the surgery might have problems. So, of course, within a week after the surgery, I got on a plane, the finger swelled up. The device they gave me, which was like a little 3-dimensional Pac-Man, it slipped off. Couldn't get it back on because my finger was too swollen. Stephanie did her best. She used earplugs and Band-Aids to improvise. She like MacGyvered this device together to keep my finger, bent forward the way they were trying to keep it. But within a few weeks, it hyperextended. It was as if the surgery never happened. So then I'm back to washing my hands, reminding me of it, applauding, reminding me of it. You know, grandkids are starting to want to play ball with me. I decided to have the surgery again. So I had the surgery again on October 6th. And we all know what happened October 7th. That was one hell of a weekend. So 4 weeks ago tomorrow, they took off the splint. They took out the stitches. There's still a pin in this, but the cast comes off tomorrow at 3:30 Pacific time, and I can't wait. I have no travel plans for at least a couple of weeks, but now I'm not close to the surgery. It's just the thing's been in the cast all this time. And I'm hoping that they said it'll be a minimal amount of physical therapy. And I'm really, really hoping to have 10 fingers again. So thank you, Kate, for the question. And that was I guess that was a bonus story. And oh my God, I've been on for almost an hour. I'm sure by now, anybody who's still watching, who watches from the beginning, thank you, you brave and kind soul. And thank you, Kate, for participating, and thank you, Vicky S. Adams, for being the first person to participate in the live chat twice, because she was on the first time. So I hope Vicky gets a chance to watch it again, and a shout out to her. Anyway, that's about it. And yes, you're very welcome, Kate. Again, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. I don't get that many views. I get a couple of dozen, but you know what? That's fine. This is an opportunity for me to tell my story, speak my mind. And again, I'm going to put the written versions on Substack. If you watch my episode 2, I talk about the story behind why I wrote the stories and what happened and all that. Anyway, it's been almost 57 minutes of blather. So by now, it is clear that the boomer has blathered. And to steal the line from Sticks, Hex, and Hammer, peace out.